Is that feedback? I'm Colleen Green, the Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development. We have here today, I think I have to, is that me or is that someone mute? Is everyone muted? Okay. We have here, an honor to have here our Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, Nina Albert. So give her a round of applause for actually being here. I don't think we've ever had a deputy mayor sitting on a DHCD Q&A for an RFP. We also have with us, very illustrious DHCD staff in the background. So if people want to ask some questions afterwards or any other relevant things that you may need. They're standing. If you could raise your hand if you are part of the DHCD family and team. So people have questions afterwards. So we are here in tradition after an RFP is released to give people a chance to ask questions, and we will give you answers to the best of our ability. I know often during these sessions, we have people that give us food for thought. And maybe amendments happen out of this conversation as well. Hopefully we have circled everything, and this was very deliberative and well thought out process. But obviously feedback is something that we value. And in that feedback is the reason why this RFP looks a little different this year. We have 3 categories in the RFP, and they are really to address sort of the current housing market that we've received feedback from our industry partners and leaders in real estate development and affordable housing. So we have 3 categories that we are trying to address in this RFP, and that is bridge financing for distressed properties, bridge financing for planned and pipeline development projects, as well as 9% low-income housing tax credits for new and preservation projects. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. We do have some people that are on video or are joining us virtually. And we will be posting all the questions and answers online so people can have an opportunity to read them, reference them, and everyone gets a chance to fairly be involved. So with that, I think the best, so I'm getting used to this format, full transparency. I usually like to sit down and have a conversation. But because people are virtual, I'm standing at a podium and on screen. So if it gets a little weird, that's totally my fault. This is new for me. So anyway, if you just raise your hand, we can recognize you and you can, but please state your name and the company that you're from when you ask the question. That would be really helpful. And with that, we'll get started. Do I need to do how is the chat? People in the chat, are they raising hands in the chat? Okay. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Marshall with the NRP Group. A question about information, obviously in the RFP. There's a bit of discrepancy about available funds in the section about who should apply. I'm looking at page 5 for whatever it's worth. Mm-hmm. Category C is designated as projects that are only eligible to apply for 9% LIHTCs and or DC LIHTCs, whereas in the section on available funding sources, I'm looking at page 34, there are additional sources available to Category C projects, operating subsidy, LRSP specifically, and then the National Housing Trust Fund. So here's to hoping the information on page 34 is the correct one and not just the one.
So the information, all funding sources are going to be going towards category A and B, except the tax credits.
Okay.
So the tax credits are for new projects only, but we'll be using all our resources for categories A and B other than the tax credits.
So that's helpful to know. So therefore, amendment would be needed for that table on page 34.
We'll take a look at that.
Avi Spector with Equity Plus. I have a couple questions, but I'm
Ask sorry, one second. Just want to go back. So if you go to page 34, it says available to category A and B, and then category C. I see what you're talking about in terms of C. We said that you could do local rent supplement and National Housing Trust Fund. We'll correct that.
Couple questions, and then I'll pass the mic and come back with more later. I have a few. First is a simple one. Just trying to understand the definition of sponsor for the 3 application per sponsor limit. A lot of projects have 2, 3, even 4 joint venture partners in them. And then joint venture partner B might be in a different deal with other people unrelated. So just trying to figure out how to define sponsor for evaluating the 3 project application per sponsor. Then within that, is it, I think I know the answer to this, but is it 3 applications total, or 3 within A, 3 within B, 3 within C, or is it just 3 across A, B, and C?
Sponsor refers to owner, developer, guarantor. If that's more than one person or more than one group, then it's a sponsor ownership entity. Then it's rolled up to whoever makes that owner or guarantor entity. So if there's a sponsor that has 2 people, it's a joint venture, they're part of the sponsorship for the review, that LLC and the background. So for all those.
So if you are a developer that is a minority member of, I'm exaggerating, 10 deals. If you go into deals 1, 2, and 3, you then can't do 4 through 10, even if you're only 10% of each.
I don't understand your question. 1, 2, 3, 4 through 10. I don't understand what you're saying.
So let's say, just use me, Avi. Avi is a 10% owner of 10 deals. But in those 10 deals, the 90% of the other project are other people unrelated to each other. So I'm a joint venture partner with Sam in project A, and
so we would want to look at anyone that's part of the ownership entity.
Got it.
Okay.
And then that's 3 applications total, right? Not 3 for A, 3 for B, 3 for C.
3 applications.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. You want to open it up? You want me to? You want to do?
Vic from Mikasa, I see your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, hi. Vic Goncalves, project manager at Mikasa. We have a couple of questions. So the first one is for category A projects. They have to already have DHCD investment. Does this include a preservation loan fund? Is that counted as a DHCD investment?
Yes.
Okay. Another question we have is for category A. Can you talk about what you all mean by a minimum of 90% lease units for longer than 1 year?
A minimum of 95% leased units for longer than 1 year. So that would indicate that you would have to have been in operation. So you can't be in pre-lease up or leasing and apply for the category A. So having been in operation, you would have had to been 95% leased for 1 year to qualify for category A.
Okay, great. Thank you. So for category B, the project requires matching funds 1-to-1 from the applicant. Therefore, does that mean that limited equity cooperatives would need to be able to match the funds that they are requesting for?
So we'd have to look at the limited equity co-op question. This was really intended for bridge financing for projects that are already in the pipeline or have planned projects that we know about. That is not something that we contemplated in terms of limited equity co-ops that are not in the pipeline or not something that's been contemplated.
Okay, similarly, there is some language about having equity already, an equity investment from the owner, but limited equity co-ops have limited equity. So we're just wondering if that would count as an equity investment.
So
already.
are you referring to a limited equity co-op that is already in our pipeline?
Well, most of ours have received preservation loans, so I don't know if that counts as being in the pipeline.
That's a good question. When we're talking about the pipeline, we're talking about planned projects that have gone through the RFP process and are in our pipeline and waiting to be closed.
Okay. I'm sure that my coworkers have other questions. There's also a good amount of questions in the chat. But I'll go ahead and unmute or mute and let my coworkers ask questions.
Jerry Joseph, you can unmute.
Thank you, Colleen. Just one question. There's reference in relative to category C. It says the priority will be given to preservation projects and projects that are experiencing delinquency rates of more than 12%. So is there a definition of how you're defining delinquency rate? Is it a annual calculation? Is there a sort of a consistent way in which there are different ways to calculate, or people use the term delinquency rate? Is it in a point in time?
When we're referring to delinquency rates, we're referring to delinquency rate on rent collections.
Right. Over what period of time? So are you looking for a current delinquency rate, or does it need to be because delinquency rate really involves collections, and so it may be.
I would look to the last year to current. If you are experiencing delinquency rate that just happened a month ago, that's not an emergency or a sustainable issue. So we would be looking back for what's happening for a year or prior to the year, in the last 2 years to up to a year. If it just happened last month, that's not something that I would indicate your reserves would need, that you don't have a situation for 1 month is not a trend.
Okay. And just to follow up, and so that's a prioritization in terms of the applications. It's not a requirement, but it would be effectively scored based higher scoring for people who are projects that are in that situation.
Right. So projects that are most in need. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Jennifer Rudolph, can you unmute?
Hi, good morning. The project that I have a couple questions, and they probably piggyback on each other, but the project that we're currently doing is we're in the middle of a LIHTC rehab. It's a property that we've owned since 2019, and it does have a substantial delinquency issue. So my question is, I kind of feel like we're falling somewhere in between category A and B. Specifically, my question around category A is we've had to take units offline so that we could do the rehab on them. So we don't necessarily meet the minimum 95% of leased units for longer than a year because they've had to come offline. So are those are those units going to be counted against us when you're looking at the category or the information category A?
So if your projects are offline as part of your development plan, you would not qualify for this.
It's not that our project is offline. We are fully operating, we're a fully operating property. It's just some of our units are coming offline and going back online as we take them off to rehab them and then put them
So
back
that would
on.
not qualify. That's part of your development plan or your rehab plan.
Okay.
Right, you're still under rehab. This is for properties that are in distress and are currently operating.
Well, we
So
are
you are
currently,
in,
yeah,
right,
we
but
are.
you have a rehabilitation plan that requires you to vacate properties. So your plan should have it included what your carry would be to do that and what you put in your proposal. So we're not going to then provide more money for a plan that's in place.
So what if, I mean, just, speaking out. So what if we already know that we don't have economic occupancy now in the units that are leased? We already know that we're probably not going to have economic occupancy in order to convert this mortgage or to convert this loan once this project is completed. I mean, like when we were awarded the funds and when we closed on our deal, those what we projected is clearly not what we're experiencing.
So you would have to have a demonstrated problem currently.
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, like, so for example, we have one of our sources is supposed to be a substantial amount of interim income. We are never going to meet that interim income that was projected because our property, the delinquency at our property right now is so bad that we are not generating interim income at all. So, I mean, it is a problem right now.
So Jennifer, you're talking about a specific problem for your project. I would encourage you to submit, but my advice to you today would be that if you had planned in your project to have some vacancies in order to rehab because there was people in place, that would be not something that would qualify here. However, if you feel like you might qualify for some sort of other bridge funding, you're under construction, you're not in operations, there may be some other suggestions around that, but this RFP really does not actually look like it responds to your situation. This RFP is for projects that are currently operating that have economic vacancy issues or other operations issues, or projects that are in the pipeline that are waiting to close and their carrying costs are becoming more exorbitant as a result of trying to get to a permanent conversion, et cetera, or a new project. So those are the three categories that we are responding to. You have a sounds like a nuanced situation. So I would suggest that maybe you contact DFD, our Development Finance Division, and get some technical assistance because it doesn't seem like what you're describing to me fits perfectly in one of these three categories.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Avi again, Equity Plus. A question on which projects are, quote, in the pipeline versus not. You got, in the last RFP round, there were basically three types of letters issued. There was, you're admitted for further underwriting immediately. There's, you're not admitted for underwriting. And then there was variations of, we want to do it, but we have to figure out either section 108 or there was like it was a but. So you were not out, you weren't in, it was so for those kind of middle letters, are those considered
No.
in the pipeline for this RFP? And then following up on that, if you have a project that is both category A and potentially C, do you do two separate apps or is it going to be clear on the portal? You just click two buttons, A, C, and keep on trucking.
So if you have A and you can use tax credits to help with this, it is one application. Just make the request for the funds. Which one? Oh. I'm seeing, what's the name? Beth? Beth Seward, can you unmute?
Hi, yeah, Jennifer Rudolph. I had the same question as her, so I'm gonna take my hand down.
Thank you. I have Holly Dennison. Do you see that? Holly Dennison. Can you unmute?
Good afternoon. This is Holly Dennison Chase from Blue Light Advisors. Is the 9% cap still applicable? And if so, how much is that cap?
I don't know the direct answer. It's a 9% cap still applicable.
As far
Okay. So we're not changing anything from what is in our QAP regarding 9%. So if there's no adjustment to that, you would have to apply within the 2023 QAP. So if the caps are there, that is, we're not changing anything. We have to go through the QAP process to update it, but the 2023 QAP applies to this RFP.
Thank you.
Alexander, would you unmute, please?
Yes, thank you. Able to hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I am also with Mikasa. I have a few questions about the structure and details around the bridge financing. So if it is a bridge loan, what kind of payments might be expected in the interim? And do we know the term? When is it actually expected to be paid down? I know for category B, it indicates that the sponsor developer will commit to repayment from an award of any future DHCD financing. Should we expect that next year, the year after in an RFP? And then do we know what kind of uses are going to be available in terms of critical repairs, debt pay down, things like that? And then how is the LRSP going to factor into these categories?
So for that was a multifaceted question.
Yes,
so
sorry
let me try
about
to
that.
get all of it. So for category B, the bridge financing, it is really to focus on the pre-development phase of a project. So if you are carrying interest carry, if you are having to pay any pre-development expenses, that is what we're talking about in that instance. In order to keep the project alive. So, you may have to do, keep going towards permits and things like that. So that's to keep the project alive. And I think in the RFP, if we're not clear, we had said up to 24 months in terms of estimating the amount that you would need.
And then the last bit was how the LSRP will factor, or LRSP, yeah.
So the LRSP would be factored in not to category B, but mostly to category A projects to help with distressed properties where it can qualify.
Thank you.
And I will clarify how it'll be used in category C because I know that was in the original. So we'll send out clarification later because I may have just forgotten that part. There's someone asking over there. Thanks. And in the meantime, while you walk over there, I think I see, is there someone else? Matt Dowling, you unmute? You still there, Matt Dowling? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is Matt Dowling from Enterprise Community Development. I'm going to ask general a couple of general questions and, just use the Q&A for specific questions. I just wanted to clarify a few things. One, with the funding at 3 properties, does that also mean you're limited to applying for 3 properties?
So we are limiting it to 3 applications.
3 applications, okay. Just wanted to make sure of that. And then these are project specific. Is there consideration in the RFP at the organizational level, given it's a partner sustainability, type view?
So at DHCD, we only fund projects and not the organization. So these are project specific.
Okay. And then related to a question that Equity Plus had regarding the sponsors, it sounded like everybody in the ownership change, so that includes any other GPs and limited partners, even though limited partners wouldn't necessarily provide any funding. So just a question, will there be criteria regarding what represents a financially secure sponsor that's included in the application, as that's part of the request?
I'm sorry, restate, will there be any criteria?
Yeah, so when it indicates that the review will include review of financially secure sponsor, is there anything in the application that'll provide the criteria what that really means?
Yes, I thought that was in the RFP, but if it's not, we'll provide clarification of what we are looking for in terms of financially secure sponsors.
Okay, and then the last general question, the funding document that will be posted as part of the application, to look at that during the application process too?
The funding document, can you clarify?
Yeah, there's a funding agreement referenced in the RFP.
So the funding agreement is that you are saying that you are committing to signing a funding agreement.
The terms of the agreement, will that be available to reference as part of the RFP, or is that
So
just...
every project is going to be a little different. So, but the funding agreement references the fact that you're willing to commit capital to solve the problem as well, along with the partnership with DHCD. So that's what the funding agreement gets to. How much that is specific to the project, is specific to your application, but the funding agreement will get to what your contribution is and what your repayment will be.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
it's not one size fits all,
Okay.
but you have to commit to being willing to sign one.
Okay, that was it for the questions I had for now. Thanks.
All right, good morning. Generalized question. My name is Sosena from Women at Work. Why is the rent delinquency threshold so high, 1 to 2 years, when it's dire versus when it could be salvageable between 3 to 6 months? This general question.
Can you repeat that?
You said that the rental delinquency threshold is 1 to 2 years to be able to qualify for the bridge finance earlier, correct? So I'm just asking, why is it such a high threshold versus when the delinquency is 3 to 6 months and still salvageable versus 2 years delinquency and developer will have a hard time retrieving?
So you can, whatever delinquency help you need is what you'll be applying for. That is the max that we're saying. So if you have a delinquency threshold that's shorter than that, then you can ask for that as well.
Okay.
If I'm answering the question correctly, and didn't really understand that.
No, that's
Okay.
clarifying it. Thank you.
Oh, Christopher Miller.
Good morning. I have 2 questions. The first one is, do projects that only have 4% LIHTC tax credits count as having federal investment for category A?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
Do projects that only have 4% LIHTC credits count as meet the federal investment requirement for category A?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second question is, for the funding agreement, projects where the sponsor, investor, and lender have already kind of worked to inject additional capital into the project, would that be taken under consideration for the funding agreement?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Calvin Jones. Can you unmute? Calvin Jones.
Hi, good morning. Hi, good morning. The question I have is more so for category C. It states that mainly 9% tax credits and/or DC only. So if I have a 9% new construction deal that may need gap funding, should we apply, or should we just wait for the next RFP?
So the 9%, if you have gap funding from elsewhere, not DHCD.
Yeah, not DHCD, but if we need DHCD funding, then don't apply.
That's not available in this round.
That's not available. That's what I thought. Thank you.
That's what I just said, right? So my deputy director said I need to clarify. So you can get the 9% tax credits, but you cannot get subordinate financing in this RFP for new projects. Was that clear? Okay.
Yes, that's clear.
Okay. So you have to wait until you, okay, thanks. Who's next? Nasim?
Yes, good morning. I have a question regarding the vacancy requirement for category A, or occupancy requirement. There seems to be a little bit of a confusion regarding the requirement to have 95% of the units leased for longer than 1 year, as stated on page 5, and then on the subsequent page, it states that the economic occupancy is less than 85%, or that characteristic must be included in a category A requirement. So would you be able to speak to what you mean by 95%, or what you mean by 85% occupancy or less, economic occupancy or less, and what the 95% occupancy rate on the P5 is?
So we want to just make sure that you had fully leased your building. And the economic occupancy speaks to maybe you have leases, but you don't have payments coming in.
Okay, and then the other question is, and I think there's also a lot of landlords here on the chat group that seem to be expressing this as well, in that they have had 95% occupancy for more than 1 year, but recently have experienced less than 95% occupancy because of normal turnover, or because tenants have moved out, passed away. If you have had delinquency for a longer, over 1 year, and have had generally longer than 95% or greater than 95% occupancy, but are now experiencing a lower occupancy, does that exclude you from qualifying?
No, what we want to see is that your building was fully leased at some point in the year or prior. And if you are having occupancy issues subsequently to being fully leased, you would qualify because you are experiencing the results of the current housing ecosystem and market conditions.
Great. Thank you so much.
No problem. Avi.
On federal lines and gap financing for Cs. I know the QAP for the feds caps at $1.2 million or $1.1 million, whatever it is, a project, and that's not changing. But given the change in the DC state LIHTC law that kicks in October 1st, I don't see in the QAP where there's a cap on DC 9s per deal. you guys might institute one for this RFP, which would be fine, but I don't think there's one currently existing. And would you plan on leaving it that way or putting a cap per deal on the DC9 subject like there is the feds?
We'll put guidance out on scoring updates subsequent to this meeting.
Okay. Back to the chat. Hi, Rosa. You want to unmute?
Hey, Colleen. Good morning. I have a couple of questions on behalf of Michael's organization. The application appears to require an appraisal that's not more than 120 days old, a market study that's not more than 6 months old, and an environmental site assessment that's not more than 2 years old. Is that really still required for properties in category A that have been fully operational for, a year or 2, 3 years?
I think it does, yes.
Okay. And then with regards to this bridge loan, what is the target with regards to repayment? What are you sort of envisioning here as far as like an interest rate, term, disbursement schedule? How would that work in real life?
For the bridge loans, we want to make that as user-friendly as possible. We're going to look at your deal, and I think that the repayment will be from the conversion of when you expect to close. I mean, that is, we want to make it helpful to folks. So once you get towards closing, I think that will be the repayment. However, if a closing never happens, we have to expect a repayment as well. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so when you say closing, you mean the permanent loan closing from the construction loan?
Right, or for people that are in the pipeline, right? So they also have a closing that hopefully will happen.
And for properties that have already converted to perm but are applying for this source of funding, what would be envisioned there, since there would be no quote closing at that point?
Property that have converted to perm would not qualify for category B.
Oh, I was talking about category A.
Right. So for category A, your question is, sorry, restate that question.
So for category A, my question is with regards to the expectation for repayment of this, what appears to be a 2-year bridge loan for delinquencies, to cover delinquencies for 2 years. What would be the repayment in the absence of a construction to loan closing?
So to bridge distressed properties, we're hoping that the market will come back. We're betting on the market coming back. We are asking for also property management plans, incentive plans, case management plans, and other incentives to encourage people to repay or to begin paying. So, and hopefully we'll see the market will change as well to address some of the ecosystem issues that have resulted in the lack of payment that is causing a lot of these delinquencies. So we're kind of betting on the market here. But any upside that happens as a result of changed behavior or incentives that are put in place, which is asked for in the delivery of the application, we'll expect those to come back as repayment for this bridge.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Elizabeth Everhart, can you unmute?
Hi, how will scoring work for category A properties?
There's a scoring sheet included in the RFP, and so you can kind of self-score to see where you would end up.
So it's the same as a typical application project?
Well, there's different categories in it. There's different evaluation, but you have a scoring sheet attached to sort of allow you to self-evaluate where you would end up in the score.
Okay. And I just want to point out that it does say that the reports, third-party reports, are specifically required only for category C. Just to try and clarify that from the previous question.
Okay, thank you.
Reports and plans required for category C project applications only for appraisal, market study, and phase one.
Okay, thank you. Karen Fletcher, can you unmute?
I'm new to the whole, the funding of things that are available in DC. I'm a new organization, a nonprofit organization working with youth. And so my question is, we are in the process of selecting the right type of home. However, just getting started, we need a bridge loan that will help us kind of start off and you know, take off run so that we can now open our doors for the youth that are waiting, whether it's in foster care or the DC jail or whatever. So my first question is, number one, is there a counselor? Well, first, would my project even qualify under A or B in doing so? And second, is there a counselor that I could work with if we are eligible? Thank
Hi,
you.
Karen, that sounds like a really amazing project. And you sound like you're doing really great work. But your project would not qualify in our current RFP.
Okay, thank you.
And if you would like, because it's such an amazing project, I would love for you to contact us and we'll try to put you in touch with some of the right people that can help.
Absolutely, please. And should I just call the office directly? Should I call you or with that information?
We'll put it in the chat for the contact.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Jerry Joseph.
Just one follow-up. What's the total amount of 9% LIHTC that's going to be available to be awarded this round?
Well, we have our annual allocation of tax credits. So it'll be our annual allocation that's available.
Which is what, 2.5?
What's our annual allocation again? It might be as much as 3 million, but we'll clarify what that is. It is, it's a calculation done by the Fed. So we'll clarify what that is coming in.
Thank you.
Are there any questions in the audience before we keep going online? Okay. Who's the next? Alexander.
Thank you. So I wanted to kind of follow up about the 3 application rule, given that we have a different structure than a lot of other people in the audience. Again, I'm with Mikasa, and we work with limited equity co-ops who are the owner, developer, all of that for the project. We merely operate as a consultant for them. However, we would be generally the ones submitting the application. Does that limit us for how many of our co-ops can go forward?
No, if you're the consultant and you're not the owner, then that's different.
Thank you.
Vic Gonzalez.
Yes, hi. So the first question is, could you clarify if it's category B or category C that needs the third-party reports?
Category C for the new projects.
Okay. And then for category A, one of the requirements is that the project must be 100% complete. And then there's, you must have a certificate of occupancy. So some of our projects, have a certificate of occupancy, are occupied, but have not had a rehab. However, they still are in the situation of category A where they, you know, are experiencing pretty high delinquencies, would those count as being 100% complete, even though they have not gone through rehab, but they are occupied currently?
If you have a investment from DHCD or a federal source, you can apply.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Any other questions in the chat? Okay. Any other? Well, we can also answer the ones in the chat. So this has been recorded and we will post all the questions and the answers. The questions that are in the chat, we will post also questions and answers so that they'll be available to everyone to review and to get feedback on and as you apply for this application. All right. Oh, one more question. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Colleen. Hey, everybody. Just a quick question in terms of the effective date. Under category A, I think you can apply for up to 24 months. Is it all forward-looking? Is there any retroactive looking in terms of delinquencies and economic vacancies in that time period? Like, are we saying?
I think you should submit what you're looking for as a need.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to reviewing the submissions and to stay in conversation in this moment in time. We've been here before. We'll get through this again. All right. Thank you, guys. Can I get a hand clap?